So for a future, so honestly, what I'm thinking, I'm in a really unique situation,
Hmm.
and nobody is often open when they are in this situation. Um, I Kenzie and I, like, we made some money with our business.
Right.
I successfully put it into some tech stocks, made some money with it, and then instead of putting it back into US dollar or keeping it in stocks, when it just seemed, it was in July of this year, we were down in California filming, and I'm like, this seems unsustainable. I'm almost parking my like assets, my capital, into clothing, which is harder to liquidate, but I feel like I have a higher impact on it rather than, like, I don't have an impact on Apple's stock worth, you know?
Right.
But for the first time in my life, I am slightly over leveraged. I mean, I've had student loans my whole life. So I've been in debt my entire adult life, which is a fascinating thought, isn't it?
Well, it depends. For some people that's normal. For others, it's not.
That's what I'm learning. I'm just trying to be open with it with
Yeah.
people because
Right.
I've always, aside from student loans, which are on pause and forbearance and whatnot, I've always had money, but now I'm slightly in debt. And it's a situation that most people don't speak openly about, which it doesn't seem like it really benefits many people. So I'm just curious, like, throughout your life, have you ever leveraged yourself, or when you've been, like, you know, I mean, you talk with, my understanding of what you do is you talk with business owners kind of frequently. You may have experienced people in that position a lot. I'm curious your thoughts on leverage, essentially.
Yeah. Well, in general, I mean, it's clear from the work that I've done and the life I've lived that there's different levels of leverage, if you want to call it that, that people are willing to extend, and their comfort is varies too. So some people don't mind going to the ultimate and spending whatever it is that they want to do, thinking that that's going to be important to them. And other people aren't willing to take that kind of a risk, so they withhold that. And they, on the other end of the spectrum, they're actually looking at a situation where you have not much, but you don't want to spend it with the idea that you'll pay for it as it goes, as opposed to using credit, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be what I've experienced anyway with people.
Move that just a little closer.
Yeah.
What are your, so you said if you'd use the term leverage, would you use credit or debt, or I'm curious?
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with that. I understand leverage is just another word that describes the circumstance, and it may be more favorable for some people to use the word leverage.
Well, a lot of people buy a house and they're like, cool, I own a house. But I'm like, no, you took on a $300,000
Debt.
They're like
Right.
heavily leveraged
Yeah.
in, like, what's it called? The housing market. Not retail, it's
Oh, you're
real
talking
estate. Like,
real estate
they're just
market,
heavily
yeah.
leveraged with all their capital in real estate.
Okay, and that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But it's helping them achieve what they want out of life. They
Yeah.
want to have a house that they can call their own, even though technically it belongs to whoever holds the paper on the house,
Mm-hmm.
until that loan is paid off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your experience, do you think it's better to go, like, my understanding is, of what you said, correct me if I'm wrong, is when you said go slower, you just mean bootstrapping
Yeah.
of, which, and like, I'm someone, you can't offend my feelings, I'm not hurt,
Yeah.
I'm speaking openly because I just want more people to talk openly about finances so it's less of a taboo.
Okay. Again, my personal values are to pay as you go, and so I'm most comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
And but I also felt that at a certain point in my life I did want to have a home, and so I did borrow money to do it. And that's probably the only time I've really borrowed money is to buy a home, and then pay it off as fast as I can. You know,
Mhm.
that's really how I looked at it. I just don't like to be in debt. I don't feel like I want to owe people or anyone something. I'd rather just say, you know, I can't have this right now, and that's just the way it is.
That's how
And-
I've been my entire life.
Yeah.
but I think maybe having student loans, so a negative net worth my
Right.
whole life almost numbed me out to it or something. But at a certain point, it's just an opportunity presented itself where the financials on purchasing these, and then really the reason why I haven't sold them yet, so I'm just preparing them, is once I sell them, I can't use them for my deal goal, which is I want to show a manufacturer that actually has the scale and a design house, hey, here's a way to add a full design to clothes that's cheaper than tie-dyeing, it's quicker, less like labor, man hours, it has a higher fidelity design, because all of these clothes in here, the cotton's grown in the US and it's sewn in the US. And I really want to hopefully reach out, connect with, and work with them almost as an exit of sorts. But as the fallback, I can sell it, which is very fortunate. I'm very fortunate. But it's weird having my money frozen in a very non-liquid asset.
Right. And of course, because the market changes, you're hoping that it changes to your favor as opposed to going the other way, because it's just like the stock market, it goes up and down.
Yeah.
And so, or changes, is however you want to call it.
No, I'd 100%. So I'd really agree, except for there's nothing like what I've made. So I'm on the forefront of bleaching clothes in an interesting way, where everyone who like on the internet, and so I've given some to friends who come on the show, and people, and they always just say like, hey, a friend wants to buy it. They don't know how much it's worth, because something like what it's worth is up to marketing, or essentially like Gucci, Balenciaga, really fancy ones, not that I would want to. They charge a really high premium, even though the product isn't as high of quality. So the market's fugazi in a way.
Well, the market is what it is, and it changes. That's all. And sometimes you ride the wave, and it's a good market, and sometimes you fall off the board, and you're in trouble.
So what is that? What could you play out that scenario for?
Yeah.
Or if you'd help me, because essentially I'm in a unique, my entire life I've been I don't want to be in debt beyond student loans. So this is a new thing. Literally, even up till this most recent month, I paid off all my credit cards in full. But I'm looking at the next month, I'm like, okay, my credit's going to have a slight amount, just a couple $100s on it. But I can see, because we do have a video client, we have a part-time video client. But I definitely did just take on a calculated risk. I figure rather than being afraid of debt my whole life, I want to confront it at a small, manageable scale early, just to see because I keep thinking every big company had to leverage or had to take on debt in order to scale. So I'm just curious. Yeah, what are the scenarios?
Well, I'd like to go back to your opening statement where you said you took on a lot of student debt with your ability to go to school, and today that's a vastly different than it was in my day, because the amount of debt I took on was almost none, and I was able to work and pay it off very quickly because of that. Student debt today is at a far higher level, and it's much more onerous because of that. And the reason why I'm going back to that in your situation is because that's where it all began. It's not like all of a sudden you're in debt. It's that you created that debt for a good reason, in order to get an education, but the way we operate today is different than 40, 50 years ago, and so you can't compare the two. That's all I want to say about that.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, but I will say, looking forward to where you are now and where you're trying to avoid being caught up in a debt-ridden situation.
Yes.
That's the part that I think you are most concerned about, and rightly so. I don't know that there's any easy answer to that, other than to say there's two ways you position yourself financially. One is you create more income, however that is, or you don't spend as much. And so those are the only two methods that help you reduce it. And of course, it goes faster if you get a combination. If you reduce expense, but also increase income. So the only thing I'll say is everyone's different, every situation's different, and you sort of have to look at your entire life and see what contributes to your decisions that cause you to spend money.
What are the values that you're kind of playing toward?
Well, that comes from, your value system initially, but you may have a certain set of values that are compromised by your circumstances. And, we all have things that come up in life you don't plan on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we all know people that have gotten very ill and they weren't expecting it. And all of a sudden they have this great debt because they have to take care of themselves in order to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say that's a prime example of someone today who tended to not get into debt, but found themselves in debt because it was far beyond anything they could anticipate.
Yeah. So, if we could bring it to you, I mean, I'm curious, what are your kind of core values or guiding? I mean, is just avoiding debt? That's like a further down, touch point of, I assume, how you want to live your life. I'm just curious how you think about money. Like, you essentially deal with money for a living, and we all deal with money in our personal lives.
Right.
You're someone who, I would assume, for a great deal of time, even more than I've been alive, have just thought about the concept of money, and I would just love to get your thoughts on it. I mean, you're yeah.
Well, I'd like to give you an answer that would qualify in every case, but I can't. What I'm going to say is the ability to manage your way of living is built upon what your hopes and dreams are, really. And if you can somehow coordinate what it's going to take to cause you to reach those goals and dreams, then maybe you can plan it better. But I can't say every situation is different. That's what I really have to say on that.
Yeah.
It's not a clear picture that one size fits all, but I know that you have talked about how do the values fit in with the way you operate in terms of your day-to-day existence. And that's really I think maybe the first thing to do is really to establish what's important to you, and then to build a budget around that.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say that, it's important to get a sense about in the next year. Maybe you could use it as a New Year's resolution or something, and just say, I'm going to have a plan for this next year, and see how it works out. And then you can evaluate that plan even 6 months into it to see if it's working. If it is, at the end of the year, you renew yourself and see how you can continue to move in that direction. But setting up a budget means you have to know where you tend to spend money, and then also what's important to you, and how much money it's going to take to get to that level that's going to allow you to do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the estimates that you have to come up with on a sheet of paper as a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to talk about, well, where's the money going to come from?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to analyze. You've given me some ideas of how you earn income now. Well, use that as your thought process, and write down all the ways that you can earn income that you presently do, and then ways that you expect to earn additional income,
Mm-hmm.
and see how that matches up. And the end of the year, if you're in the black, that means you've got a little more income than what you've spent. Hopefully that'll go into some kind of savings or investments. It doesn't mean that you don't spend money to do that, because maybe you decided to buy a home.
Mm-hmm.
So you put it into a fund that allows you to put a down payment on a home. That would be one example. Another idea would be to that money that is hopefully in the black, it will allow you to think of different ways to use that. Maybe you have a chance to just do something simple like open up a savings account, or you may have an investor that you could talk to that you feel they're giving you some options that will allow you to make a little more than you might get in a bank situation, for example. But I will say this: your goals, which are built on your values, will help you determine what your next year is going to look like if you put it down in front of you and sort of think it through. And then the tough part is the discipline. You have to be committed to that plan, otherwise it'll never work. I don't think it's any different than if you're taking weight loss classes or something. It's going to help you to say, okay, my goal is to knock off 10 pounds, and in order to do that, I'm going to have to do this, this, and this, but I have to be dogmatic about it and do it the same way each time. Try it for 3 months and see how that works. And if you're moving along, that gives you encouragement to continue on.
I'd say all of what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and it's how I've lived my life up until this most recent year.
Okay.
But so a large part of what brought this on is so we do video work for a living.
Right.
But with AI, the advent of it, pretty much all digital jobs are up for, they could disappear if like I'm trying to hedge in a physical way.
Yeah.
And also again, this is my way of parking money, so I put it
It's an investment.
Yeah, so successful stocks, I took the money out that I put in just the gains.
Right.
I put into cotton and bleach. Because at the end of the day, clothing will all and really, really high quality clothing just will always be valuable to someone. But it's just an interesting, I don't think that people today have the luxury of planning so much a year out. I think a lot of young people today are taking kind of bigger risks because just money, inflation's 3% a year, but the amount of money that the amount of house that my money could buy, like if I had $100,000 and then a year from now, I can buy 80% as much house. So really, like, the US dollar is not a stable place to just kind of park capital.
Yeah.
Is the world we're living in. It seems like to me, I'm curious.
Well, everything's built upon trust that things are going to continue on.
Yes.
And
faith.
You and I both know, if you just look at the news from day to day, that could change any moment. I mean, look at the hurricane folks back in the Southeast, what they're dealing with. Who could have, generally speaking, there's going to be hurricanes coming through.
North Carolina, who could have seen that?
Yeah.
If I had done all this in North Carolina and a hurricane came and flooded and I lost it all,
right.
I couldn't, what would I do? It's so...
Well, hopefully you have insurance that would help pay for some of that. But even the insurance companies are going, they're in a difficult situation themselves because they can't even plan for that worst case scenario, and that's what happened.
And the U.S. government as a whole is so in debt and so leveraged, or however it's going to be, that it almost just seems like, just the numbers. It's like I'm most likely not going to have, what's it called when I turn 65?
Social Security.
Yeah, Social Security is going to run out unless some radical changes happen. So I'm just at a point in life where I think, most people are on some sort of drug to stay sane. I'm very fortunate in that I'm not on an anti-anxiety or an SSRI,
right.
But my way that I can make that happen is I have to have faith that I have a chance at success in life. And it's just becoming a situation where the stable getting like a traditional job. A lot of government jobs even could be automated away quite easy. Just trying to think of what field, because I went to school for physical therapy. So that initial debt, the initial sin that brought me into this whole place, was towards something. I was an 18-year-old. I had no idea what any of it meant. My parents said, go to college. I had horrible chronic pain at the time. So I went to be a physical therapist just because I was like, I'm going to figure out how to fix my own pain. And I'm very fortunate that it happened. But then the actual, it was funny. It was my third year into college, my first day at a PT office. And I was like, oh, this is not what I want to do the rest of my life. By then I'm already 18 grand in debt. And then just to finish out that last year of mostly extracurriculars, so I'm like, I've been $25,000 in debt since I've been an adult.
I see.
Since I've joined the workforce in life.
Right.
So, the position I'm in, it's funny. I'm not like, I don't have an anxiety. I don't have a concern about it. I definitely could overcome it, but I just want to be open to the idea that the majority of successful businesses use, like you sell a house and then people say, oh, you take out a lien against it and you buy too. Like, people are very leveraged in today's society, but it's something that it's taboo to think about being in debt. So I'm just trying to bridge that gap in my mind of how to kind of think of those two.
Yeah. Again, your value is to maybe not be in debt. Well, there are some people that don't see it that way, and they as you say, leverage one for another with the idea that, ultimately, if they do it well enough, they'll have more than enough money to pay it all off. That's their hope. Reality may not go with that, but that's their hope. And in the end, we all act on our hopes.
Yeah. And fears. A lot of fear-based.
Well, exactly. But fear comes into it when all of a sudden hope doesn't look so hopeful. So I'll just say, try to look at it in bite-sized bits as opposed to one big item that you have to take care of as soon as possible. Because the reality is, unless you're win the lottery or there's some kind of a windfall that comes from something,
windfall.
Yeah,
from the windfalling.
Exactly. Unless you have that, you're going to have you won't have the ability to pay those debts off. And I did want to comment about, you're right about one thing. When it comes to business anyway, there's a time when debt makes sense, and you have to know that. And maybe the best way to look at it is a business that has a seasonal base. So let's say they do a lot of crops in the summer, they harvest them in the fall, and then over the winter things are a little slack as far as the money coming in, and but they have to pay people to keep the equipment up, to get ready for planting and so forth. So they take out what we call a line of credit, and it's really an ability for cash flow to be there when you need it. And then you pay down the line of credit when the money starts coming in from your sale of your products. If you could look at that angle in business, it makes sense for them to have debt. And then while you're not using it, you're not gaining interest on that. It's strictly only on the balance that's left. So if you pay off that line of credit when your money starts coming in, you'll have zero interest, but you have access to it as you need it. That would be, to me, a good use of debt. There are other businesses that I know about that if they want to buy equipment, and there's good tax reasons to do it at a certain time of year, and the accountants will validate that. They'll just say, you've earned this much, and you're going to need this equipment next year, and in order to get full benefit of your depreciation and so forth, now's the time to buy. So maybe you don't have the cash right then and there, so you borrow money for the equipment, and then later you pay it off.
Yeah.
But you've made a good decision because you've got what you need to continue to grow your business.
To pull it back from money, because I don't want to pigeonhole you, let's take a quick breather of just who you are. What are some foundational things that have happened in your life that kind of formed who you were? Events like decisions to take that job or to move there or to meet a partner. Or, I'm just curious, kind of some framing behind all of what you're saying.
Okay, well, I mean, really, we're all part and parcel of our upbringing and our values that are imparted to us by people close to us. So, that's certainly part of my life too. So,
breaking news: your parents were a big part of your life.
Yes,
You're a
they
very
very
unique
much.
person in that way. No.
No,
So
I know what you're saying, but in this case, for me, it was my parents, and I was raised in a very typical American household, second generation Irish American in Boston, and so I was raised in neighborhoods where there were 4 to 10 kids in the family. It depends on that, and so everyone was struggling. Usually, the fathers worked. My father was a railroad car cleaner. So what did he do? He cleaned railroad cars for 44 years. He also was involved in bringing the troops onto Omaha Beach as a coxswain in the Navy, and he had some medical issues that came from that. So he wasn't able to progress in his career like a lot of folks were, but he certainly was a model for me in terms of understanding what he valued, and he taught me a lot through that method. And my mom stayed at home raising 5 children, and it was a case of we always had enough to eat and so forth, but it was tight, and I had to get scholarships in order to go to school and stuff. So that was my way of helping to pay the costs, and I worked.
and you went,
From the time I was 13 on. It's sort of like
wow,
we all.
13's young.
Well, it seems young. My dad actually started when he was 8.
Wow.
We were both caddies. We caddied, and which taught me the value of
Service.
and the fact that you if you wanted a dollar, you had to earn it. And that was. And I actually look forward to it. I know you don't hear that so much anymore, especially when you're looking for people wanting to work. They just don't seem to have that interest, the same interest.
It's an interesting. I mean, the idea that I have the freedom to try to create a good or service that people want to, on their own volition, spend money on,
Right,
is the most driving force in my life. It's a beauty.
Well, that's a wonderful gift, and as you point out, not everyone has it, but if you do, I know you'll be successful because you'll feel good about yourself, number one, and number two, you'll help other people feel good about themselves. So, but after high school and college, I went into a program that some people are familiar with today. It was called AmeriCorps, and I worked in Appalachia, which in the coal mining towns that were built way back in the early 1900s, and I worked on the subject of housing. Even then, housing was pretty bad for the people that lived in those towns, and so. But I did that for a while, and then I later worked in social work setting. I helped to establish a mental health facility in Humboldt County, and in fact, it was the first one, and was able to work as a bookkeeper for them, but I did all the fundraising for them too to get them going, and so
What was that like?
that was very interesting.
Yeah, I bet.
That's sort of like, well, there was a big gap in service in those days. That was in the early 70s, and so I had a chance to, first of all, learn to do things I never dreamt of doing while I was in school. And again, college schooling in general is very valuable in terms of understanding the theory, but the practical application of that theory is what pays you.
Yep.
And so you have to try to figure that out. And so that was one thing I did, and then went back to graduate school and got a degree in I thought I wanted to do counseling and elementary education, so I did that. And then finally we came to Cottage Grove, where I got a job in the school district and worked there for a while, and worked for the Catholic Church and their education program. And then I said, I'm really most interested in community relations. It took me that many years to sort of sort out what is it I was really interested
So you were
in.
how old by that age?
About so I was about 29 when I realized that. So I was about 29 when I realized it. And then I started applying for positions that met that criteria. And I was able to go to work for Pacificor, which is an electric utility in the Northwest. And I ended up working in customer relations and sales, and I did that for 32 years. Ultimately, I ended up being in charge of the energy efficiency programs for 5 states and residential energy efficiency throughout those 5 states. And it was a very interesting job in that sense, because that is sort of the framework in which we're operating today, because first thing you want to do is save it and then you can grow it from there. But and we do need to grow it because we have more needs for it. But so become as efficient as possible. That's kind of and that fit in with my value systems too that I was talking to you earlier. That was a kind of from that I ended up going into public office for about 14 years, and that was interesting too, because that gave me another dimension to my understanding of how the world worked and also how you can make a difference in people's lives. And so
I'm curious to delve into that. So it's funny, you realized that when entering the bureaucratic machine that is the government,
yes,
is when you realized the impact you could have helping people.
yes,
Yeah, I'm curious, but now you don't work for the government. I'm curious.
I don't,
you know,
I'm still doing it, helping people though.
Yes,
That's
it seems easier to do not at the government.
Different.
Yeah.
Maybe let me explain what I don't know if have you ever taken a course called Junior Achievement?
Never heard of it.
Okay. Well, it's actually a nonprofit organization that's established somewhere many years ago, and it's basically privately funded, and they operate in different locations. I assume they have it in Eugene now, but at the time in Cottage Grove they had Junior Achievement, and some local foundations paid for a director to come in and teach you how to work with children and older kids too on the issue of our capitalism for the United States, what it's built on. And really the best learning I ever got, I felt, in terms of business understanding, was how important it is for business and government to have a place in society, because they actually, I know it feels antagonistic in many ways, but if it does its job right, the government provides a level playing field for business to be successful. And if you don't have that, you're in a country that, you can't make it, mm-hmm. or it's owned by the country, and so you don't have capitalism. Yeah. And so I'll just say this: it's really that was the basis of my learning that I felt again was in line with my values, that said, we want to have a place where people can take an idea and run with that idea and hopefully make a living off that idea. And not only that, but the society benefits because no one else has thought of it either. And mm-hmm. so we all learn from that. And so I felt like that was a major learning step in my process. And
so if I'm there right now,
yeah.
I have an idea and I ran, and it was of use to society, our videography marketing business.
Right.
And now I have a second shot on goal, a second one, because as a hedge against AI, because it's very just, first off, I love video. I hope to be able to do it continually forever.
Right.
But just we've been meeting some clients who are like, I just take a bunch of stock footage with an AI voiceover, like they just have it do it all for them.
Right.
So just being a pragmatist and saying what's currently happening, rather than just saying, oh, I hate it, or oh, I'm going to fully use it, because I really don't like the impact it has in terms of the only thing that's really of true value in life is human to human connection.
Right.
And having an AI or just like some word salad kind of jumble it up in the middle, it seems to always usually obfuscate the real core message of the communication. So it's something I use, and parse, but it's not like a wholesale item that I'm like, AI is like the backbone of my thing. But just getting away from tech, that's also how I've stayed sane and managed to not be, anxious in a world that's every day we're telling like climate change is going to kill you. So even if you're financially successful,
Right.
the planet's going to be done, especially by your kids' age. So it's like, Jesus, how do you deal with that? And then, all the jobs are getting on them. It's like, and then there's so much that could fill it. So just getting away from that and making a really unique, but like, man, the most conviction I've had for any financial shot on goal or anything that I've set my assets into is this. It really has helped just to get away from a computer for a little while. But what's the space that you were talking about? You said building a space where people can take an idea and run with it.
Mm-hmm.
What's the yeah.
Well, that's the entrepreneurial spirit in the United States, I feel. And I don't say it's not in other places. Obviously, most democracies have very successful businesses, but I'm going to say it's the generation of the idea that comes with diversity, I think. Mm-hmm. And I say that because I know some people feel like diversity is a bad word or something. I don't feel that way at all. I feel like if you're part of a group of people, you want people to look at things differently. And out of that will come some ideas that will generate income because you create a product or a service that many people want. And sometimes they don't even know they want it because I wish I had an example right off the top. You can probably help me with that. But just think of something that no one ever knew about or thought they needed. Paperclip, okay?
Yeah.
I know paper clips are dying, it seems like, but I still use them from time to time. But I'm going to say...
for a while, they're pretty pivotal there in the world.
Right. I mean, and whoever came up with that knew that the world benefited by it, but no one else knew about it, until they started seeing, oh, yeah, I can do this with it, Mm-hmm. So I'll just say it's sort of like what makes us uniquely human is our ability to think. And I love the idea that people can invent things, and that's part of my joy in the things that I do in life is I find myself talking to people that have done that or have demonstrated it, and it gives me hope that we can solve problems because we have that diversity of thought that allows unique solutions to come about.
It's a very interesting thing, just diversity of thought. Like Kenzie and I, just my partner and I, like we've just running a business for going on 2 years.
Right.
We've just realized that almost any new problem or challenge that we face, we have almost diametrically opposite modes of thinking.
Yeah.
And it's just been really fascinating to be like, okay, well, what's the best of both options, or what's the middle ground?
Right.
There can be diversity of thoughts in two people who are probably twins, but maybe one of them had a unique situation. Just it's very interesting. Just diversity of thought really does allow just new ideas to enter the mix.
Yeah, I mean, and frankly, some people are highly paid for those new thoughts. Mm-hmm. And I would just say, well, it's what keeps things moving.
Yes.
And if you look at the history of humankind, it's really in order to survive, you had to keep moving. Mm-hmm. And whether it's always good or bad is secondary. It happens because it's required to move on, and mm-hmm. that's really ultimately the things that are bad get dropped off, and things that are good are enhanced or grow into something else. But we're fortunate, I think. That's why I really love the United States, is because we're built on that spirit of people coming here to make life better for themselves. And I can speak for my own family that way. So I feel like most families would say the same thing. And that word hope is really the ability to take you to that next level. Because if it's too far out, there's no hope, and you give up. Mm-hmm. And so what you want is an element of hope.
What do you hope for today? But, you know, it's changed over the course of your life.
Right.
I'm curious what, like, today is your hope?
My hope for the future? Well, it's hard to talk about it right today after the election last night, but I'll just say I hope that the United States can somehow find a way to realize that the values that made us what we are the values that will help us in the future too, and not to lose sight of those values. And you and I have just talked about some of those values, but in the end, you know, I'll speak as if I'm looking at my grandchildren. You know, what I would like them to be able to have is a sense that life can be challenging but exciting, and that there is a hope that you can actually enjoy life.
Mm-hmm.
and as long as you can do that, you'll want it for other people after you, you know. So I don't know if that's the answer, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I'm continually hopeful about that. I think I do my best work when I'm mentally at peace with myself and feel good and I'm enjoying it. And it's just I'm persistently trying to remind everyone around me at all times, nobody can force you to be upset today. Like at the end of the day, you really can just, it's really hard to say. Some people have horrible situations, but
right, they're born into it actually.
But a lot of people in pretty good situations make, their own little living hell for them. But essentially just the idea that being happy. So, I mean, I believe you mentioned that you grew up Catholic, or that was a part of it. Catholic guilt is a phrase that has been around in society. So a lot of people just kind of internalize the idea that like being happy will have an equal and opposite negative at some point in life. Like people feel that like happiness is unsustainable. It seems like that's kind of the general idea that I get from a lot of people. But I personally just think I build my best relationships. I do my best work when I'm happy, or a relative happiness, you know? So I'm curious kind of how you came around, or did the Catholic guilt never quite stick for you? And I'm curious, where you're at.
I'm not here to speak for the Catholic Church, but I can say this, that whatever faith or whatever way of life you're raised in, you know, if that's the basis of your value system, which it typically is, there's good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want, of course, is to try to do as much as possible the good. Sometimes I fail. But I also know that life is full of ups and downs, and I would like to be happy 100% of the time, but I don't think the human individual is capable of 100% happiness 24/7. I'm just saying it's more like a trend as opposed to a complete ability. So you want to be moving in the direction of happiness, to feel like you have that hope to enjoy things in life, and yet.
So would you say you've been happier over the years?
Yeah, I feel that way myself. Do I have my moments? Absolutely,
course,
just like everyone else. I have every same emotions that everyone else has, you know, and some of them they're all valid, but they aren't necessarily what you want at the time, but you deal with it the best you can. I think it's important to sustain yourself with good people around you too, because there are moments when maybe I can't handle something very well and someone else can.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about Kenzie and your decision making with your business and so forth, and I thought of my spouse, how the same reason that we have come from a similar value system, we have a complete opposite approach to it, but I say to her, is the same reason we get together and argue and disagree on things is the same reason why I think we make mostly good decisions, and that's from a 360-degree look as opposed to a 180 look.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I'm saying is find something that you trust the other person, and that trust sustains you during the difficult times. That's about it.
And that's where we have a very similar value set,
Yeah.
but then it's just the approach to every situation is just like, it's almost like mind blowing the first like handful of times, and not even just with her, it's with everyone.
Right.
It's really kind of mind blowing the first time you like see someone's thought process to a situation, and it's like, I would have never considered that or gone there.
Right.
And sometimes it's better than the way like I currently thought about it. Sometimes it's like, oh, like it's the exchange of ideas really is the ultimate like goal of what kind of elevates all of a community or a family or humanity.
Right. And we know that there'll be times when it's just not going to go the way you would like it to go. But in the end, you just have to get through that time period, and that comes from support as well as your own self-mobilization, your ability to
Is there
get past something.
any examples of times in your life that have been like that like you feel okay talking about, I assume, in hindsight?
As far as, a difficult time, you mean?
Yeah, you've been bringing it up a couple times. I'm curious what that, like, when you're like, you just got to get through it.
I try to compare myself to my father, and I think I had nothing to compare, what he dealt with. I gave you one example of his life, but he grew up in a family of 11 children, and when he was 8 or 9, he was actually given away to his aunt and uncle to raise him because they didn't have enough food in the home.
Wow.
And I didn't have that. I grew up in a pretty solid environment, even though he had some challenges for himself. And I think my mother had to take on a lot more responsibility because of that. But I admire her for that, her ability to do that. For myself, I have the same disappointments everyone else has, which is, I didn't get a job I wanted, or I didn't get a good score in my tests that I wanted. I have the same, or I didn't make that basket when I should have. Those are the things that come up on a daily basis that are sort of annoying looking back on it, but that's just the way it goes, and hopefully, I've had some times in my life that are, I can't think of any that would be dramatic, and other than the time I was dealing with my brother, he had juvenile diabetes, and he was they actually needed to get a kidney transplant for him. So all of his siblings tested for it, and I happened to have the best match.
Wow.
And so this is 40 years ago now. And so when you know it, I'm 3,000 miles away, everyone else is back there, and I'm thinking to myself, well, if it's meant to be, it is. And but the problem was they assigned a doctor who was my advocate, and he had an advocate. And the idea was that you had to make sure you wanted to do this, or else it would be one of those things that you'd regret. And so I'll just tell you this much, that I think it was about February, March that we started the process, and the doctor kept questioning me and making sure that I was okay, and I was getting annoyed because it was taking so long, and of course I had a cold right when it all started, and about 9 months later, I finally said to the doctor, I know you're playing my advocate to the ultimate, but I'm going to fire you. I said that meaning I have to have another doctor because you're not letting me do this, and I think I should. And so that was a tough time for me dealing with that. And after the operation, my cold was gone. So for 9 months I had a cold, and I realized it was all stress related, because wondering when is this going to happen, and having to put it off and then have to fly back, and actually they wanted to do it in Portland, but I said I'm not going to take a chance of my kidney not making it back there and then being inserted. So we laid next to each other back in Boston, That's when the operation took place. That was it affected, my family and everyone else in it. You know?
Yeah.
So
Being in stress for 9 months,
Yeah.
much less.
Right.
At the end of it, you one kidney down. That's
I didn't realize how much of it until until the day after, and I said, "God, my cold is gone." So I said to myself, "That tells you what stress does."
Yeah. Stress is
It's working in the
basis of all-
background.
it
You may
is.
it may not be right there. Like your car is gonna hit something, and it's going to happen. That's a different kind of stress, but something that's operating in the background. So that would be one example I have.
Since that experience, have you been able to recognize it better when you're under, or is that the most extreme stress you've been under? Or like, if have you know,
I do. I'll give you another example.
or like, have you recognized it and been able to be like, oh, I think this is stress, whereas the first time
Yes,
with the
I
kidney,
have. To
you're
answer
like,
your question,
cool.
yes, I have. I mean, that's again part of life's lessons. You just learn what
Signs.
works and what doesn't. Yeah,
Yep.
that's a good way to look at it. It's a science. You're right.
I was gonna say signs, like signs
Oh.
of just being able to just, hey, maybe I'm avoiding thinking about something,
Mm.
and maybe that's just because.
No, I think you have a good sense about it. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we all have those stories. It's not the same story for every person, but
Mhm.
we're all dealing with. So from a health standpoint, that was something and I was only about 35 at the time. So
That's a big decision at 35
Yeah.
to give a kidney for a brother. That's
yeah,
surreal. That's a situation most people will never experience.
right. And but most people would do it if they had the opportunity. It's just that maybe it didn't come along, so you don't. Maybe they did something else. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We all have something that we are faced with.
So it seems like because many times throughout this episode, we're close to an hour, you've mentioned values, but you haven't explicitly said yours. My guess, if I were to, like ad hoc after hearing all that you've said, say my guess is family and community would be pretty much your paramount, and hope, faith, belief in the things getting better, and then community and family. I'm curious if you have a third, or if I'm how my guess is.
I think you described pretty concisely exactly what most of my life has been like, and I feel like most people, other than having differences in each of those, would have the same story, but I can't think of anything else off the top anyway that would make a difference in terms of values. That the one thing I'll say about the community aspect was that my commitment to the community, whether it's through work or through public service, I always felt it was an extension of my family. So I viewed that as my family also. So the combination is really, and everyone does it differently. I know there's some people in the community that have the best looking yards that you'd ever want to have, which I don't have, but they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it adds beauty to the community. That's not me, but maybe I could help in a different way. And so I found that's my interest in public service was in working through policies and procedures that made life better, hopefully, for the community.
And today you're getting to do that?
I'm doing this in my job by
That's great.
helping. My goal would be to help every business be successful. And if they're successful, that means they'll create jobs for other families.
Mm-hmm.
And the community benefits because now you have healthy economic families that are able to move in a direction that they want to.
And to make it a little bit more precise, in what way do you help businesses succeed? Because it's an open-ended.
It's a very broad statement, but the way I would do it is
the way you do it.
Well, that's right. You're right. Thank you for clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
I would sit and listen to someone tell me about their business and what they want to do. Sometimes it's a startup. Sometimes it's an existing business. And then I'll just say, what are the challenges you're having about that? And then they'll tell me, and then sometimes I may have some ideas that they hadn't thought of that make a difference. Sometimes I don't. But I will say, in every case, they can count on me being able to provide insights that they might not have had, and maybe even connections with parties that can help them further their goals. And that's what I get my enjoyment out of the current position I'm in.
It's one of the most joyous things in life is connecting two people when you know it'll benefit their life and it reflects well on you to both of them because you connected them. It's truly one of the most subtle but profound joys in life is ooh, this would benefit everyone if you two
got together.
Connected. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes you introduce them, and even though it's seemingly a perfect match, there are slightly different fields or interests, or it doesn't always work. But when it does work, and it's really beautiful.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way because you summarized it very well. Thank you.
Yeah. Closing thought. This is my first episode back. Sorry if I was a little rough and tumble. You're very well spoken. I have one question for you though.
Okay, all right.
Eye contact. I think when we met at Lane Small Business Development Center Fair, you had an amount of eye contact that I don't normally get much in life. Part of the reason I started the show was I didn't, aside from Kenzie, I wasn't just sitting and talking to people. People just don't sit and talk to people very much anymore. Where we're not checking the phone or eating or some distraction. But on the show, you've had a level of less eye contact. Some people do none the whole show, which is an oddity. But you clearly are comfortable with eye contact. I'm curious if it's just a level of deep thought.
Oh, here I go.
Yeah, that was good.
I think part of my thinking on that is I'm trying to think of how to respond. If I'm just having a natural conversation with you, and I know you're trying to set it up that way, and that's a good format, I think. But I'm not necessarily practiced in what I'm doing, and I'm trying to think through how can I say it in a way that makes sense to not just you, but your listeners, and so it causes me to look to the side to give myself focus on how can I say this, whereas opposed to having just a conversation with you.
No mics or cameras.
Yeah.
So how could I, do you think, better achieve that goal of that? Because that is my intended goal.
Right.
Because who listens to this, it's I mean, the most impactful person who could listen to this podcast would be your grandkid in 30 years.
Yeah.
And be like, wow, and just that familial connection.
Yeah.
The reason I'm doing this is tenfold. Documentarian of people and their place in life. For some people, it's networking or getting ideas out. For everyone, it's different. But my intended goal is just to document an authentic just conversation of two people sitting in a location.
Okay.
Is there enough room? This is my previous room with the episode you watched. We had more room behind us, so I'm a little bit closer to the wall. I wanted you to have some room. Are you comfortable in here? Yeah,
I'm comfortable in this space. Yeah.
And then conversation.
Some people might not be, but I am. And let's see. I'm not sure how I could help you make sure others have, including
just you,
myself, me.
What may have made a difference? Maybe the topic I should have started with personal. And then transition.
I think that would have helped.
Yeah. Again, it's been a whole year since I've done one of these. Cool.
And I'm much more able to talk more personally, like most human beings, than I am professionally. But I'll say that would help. Mm-hmm. It would get me probably started on the right foot. Mm-hmm. That's a good thought. I'm not sure what else you could do other than say up front to someone, you just explain to me why you're trying to do this, and that helps me understand why it's important that I look to you when I'm talking. Mm-hmm. That's probably the best thing you can do because it's a starting place for people, and then in the end, you're learning what works for most people. I think not just. But then start with the personal. So I would say those two steps are probably going to help you with other people.
Beautiful. I appreciate that. I've workshopped what to tell people before the show so many times. And sometimes it can be read wrong and then people think it's a certain thing. So it's really hard because it's not only am I confirming, hey, do you have time to meet to people? Do you also have time to meet in person? And are you okay recording it?
Right.
And like, so it's like there's so many checks to
Right.
get someone on an episode, and just communication has such an opportunity to create confusion.
Right.
And my main goal with communication
Right.
is to reduce confusion, and just, so it's the preamble. I'm going to give it another attempt of just saying,
Is that what you mean by a preamble? You just
Yeah.
go over
conversation
ground
before,
rules?
yeah.
Okay.
Maybe what I text you about the show, or what I
Yeah.
tell you, or before we start airing, just anything that's setting the stage. Because I will say, diversity of ideas, not telling people anything about it.
Right.
How I've played off of some people's energy. Like, some people just take the reins. They're like, they've been waiting for an opportunity to be on air. They've just been dying for it. And I'm like, cool, you can do whatever you want with it.
Right.
Like, you have a video recording of yourself. And I've learned, and I've actually adjusted what I do on the show because of them. So it's an interesting thing of leaving that open,
Right.
by not kind of defining what I want it to be.
Right.
Because, it's not necessarily an interview, although the goal of it is to get your ideas, like your story, for maybe some grounding about who you are. But really, it's like your way of thinking.
Right.
Just capturing that, I think,
Right.
goes back to the exchange of information. That's what helps people live better lives.
The end.
You got a couple nuggets in here. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for talking and sharing.
Yeah.
It was a joy.
Okay. Well, thank you for asking me. And hopefully, I'll be anxious to hear where you go with your business, because you've given me some insight as to what you're trying to do. And I know you have to physically move as your next major step. But after that, hopefully you'll be in a position to grow your business.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting situation. My quip is nothing's for sale, because a lot of people have been like, hey, can I buy some? But I didn't buy and then die it all just to trade it back for money. I just traded money to put it into this, because cotton doesn't go bad.
Right.
It's funny, vintage teas are actually worth significantly more, although
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
I know, it's people really crave that
Texture.
I'm curious if you feel like this kind of cotton shirt, just like, it's just thick, real.
It's comfortable.
It's comfortable.
That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
The word is comfortable, because I can't. I remember this guy when I first came to Cottage Grove 50 years ago. I went in to get some shoes, and he said, "Do you want some socks with the shoes?" And I said, "Oh no, I got socks." He said, "Well, do you have the kind that are, you buy at the store that are
Polyester
and so forth?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Yeah, how did you know?" He says, "Well, most people do."
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Well, what I have is cotton."
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, but cotton doesn't last as long." And he said, "Yeah, but it's a lot more comfortable."
It breathes. Your
And he
feet
says,
don't sweat.
he said, "You'll come back to me in 10 years and you'll want cotton."
Yeah.
That's what he said to me.
And did you, or do you use
Well,
polyester?
I do now.
Yeah.
I prefer that. When I say cotton, it may be a mixture. I don't look
Cotton
for
and wool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have more natural socks. I'll use that.
So I would say January of this year, I didn't own any. I wore mostly hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
I had no idea the makeup, or no specific brand. I wore random clothes, but I had a chronic physical pain.
Oh.
And I started wearing just cotton shirts. And it's purely the breathability, the heat retention would cause me to start messing with it, and then activating the muscle would generate heat, which would then get trapped again.
Huh.
And I didn't know. I was trying to find all these. Am I dehydrated? What's the cause of this chronic physical? It's not pain. What I dealt with earlier before I went to school was pain. This is more of just like a motor tic, or like an annoyance or fatigue.
I see.
But it was for a couple of years, and then so finding the answer to that
Wow.
was so like transformational, of like, oh, this can not only my comfort, my just like, because when I'm comfortable, I just feel better. I'm not thinking about something isn't distracting my thought. When I'm comfortable, and especially the ability to, like, the fact that it removed pain in my life, was I'm like, oh, this has value. This is, what is value? Value is something that improves people's lives.
Right. That's a good way of looking at it. But they have to understand that value.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can say all you want, but if they don't get it, you know this value, and maybe science knows this value, but if they don't get it, then they're not going to buy because they have to understand it. So that's the secret, I think. How do you help people see that what you have is going to help them? Yeah.
It's really tricky because, I mean, marketer, I think about it all the time, but specifically online, you can't tell someone how it feels.
Right.
You just can't.
Right.
And every company is like, we have it super soft, and then you look at the materials and it's 100% polyester. And it's just, it's
Not the same.
Fortunately, the designs that I've been adding to them look high quality enough that people have a lot of interest in purchasing them. And then I have the faith that then them having 100% cotton that's of substantial quality will then make them want to get more later on.
When are you going to sell those RIU?
Those right there are ones that I've picked off, but the amount, like, think about the amount of time and energy it would take to,
Wrap it up,
ship it, shipping costs. But essentially, the majority of them I want to keep because my real driving goal is to find an existing manufacturer that has the workers, they have the place. Because, I mean, this is
smart.
Yeah, this is one person with a small backyard made over 500 pieces where the entire article of clothing has designs on it. And it's significantly higher than tie-dye. I did some tie-dye as examples because, like, that's what a manufacturer should probably base it against. Most people have, like, a hippie association with tie-dye or whatever it is. But essentially, if you just look at the fidelity of, like, tie-dye gets kind of blurry.
I see that.
And
that doesn't.
And it doesn't. It goes down to the individual level. And it takes a tenth of the amount of time and the actual, like, taking a clothing and then altering it. It costs significantly less because tie-dye, you have to let it sit for 24 hours. The dye is expensive. You have to soak it in soda ash so the fibers react. Whereas everyone's fear-based not bleaching clothes, or they bleach it in a certain way. But I just saw this glimmer of what it could look like. And it's just been this progression of every single one that I did, it'd be in a different method or a slightly different way. And it just kind of built out into being this thing where I could reliably and consistently get designs that all looked quite different. And so those are hoodies, if you believe it or not.
Oh.
But, like,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
this as, like, clothing, like, it doesn't necessarily exist on the market. You can have polyester that's printed with, like, a faux design, but then at the seams, like, it won't match up. So it's the fact that this is, like, I've created a new thing for the marketplace, and I don't want to rush into exchanging it back for US dollar. Like, I put all the energy and time into exchanging US dollar for this, you know?
Do you have it patented?
I don't think it's a patentable idea.
Okay. All right. I don't know that it is or it isn't. That's why I'm asking.
And
your technique might be. That's why I'm asking.
Funny enough, I'd almost teach it out of the, just, like, I'd open source it. Like, I'd meet the manufacturer and say, I'd love to just, like, teach you this, and then I'd love to, clearly this should show my drive and passion for this industry. I don't think that this is the edge of the iceberg. Like, this isn't the end of my knowledge. Like,
I see.
If I have more capacity to test and to try new things, I mean, I've done all of this without even sewing or hemming or anything, like, much less, like, cutting and adding, like, these things. So clothing just took me out of the blue. I was always digital my whole life. I wrote, like, a book and a screenplay. I put an album out. Like, I was into music. I was into writing. Video really took me, and then that's the one that actually could make a career with. So this is my first physical venture, and it's really rewarding in the sense that nothing that I've ever done, people have been able to hold in their hands. Nothing's created as much of a positive feedback of people are just, like, out in the blue, just out in the world of, like, can I get that, or where can I get that?
Well, let me tell you why I'm asking the question, because I don't really know a lot, but I would just say I would talk to a patent attorney and just see if it is reasonable. But in the end, you created an idea. You're the entrepreneur I was describing. And by the way, who did this?
I made the table.
That's
it's
awesome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And all my life I've just been consistently
You're funny.
R&Ding whatever I've been had at my disposal. So I made this 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So the epoxy on top's starting to crack, I think, right there. So it'll have to be replaced at some point in life, but
But
yeah.
well,
It's funny that
is
there
it
a
on
similar-
paper or is it on cloth?
This is a butcher block.
Yeah.
And then I took acrylic paint
Oh.
with
Oh, it's right on the block
right
itself.
on the block, and then epoxy over it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm just now putting together how similar of kind of a design pattern these have, and that comes from I didn't just before I bleached. I would screen print. So I make designs, I put them on screens, and then I put them all over clothes. And like this is glow in the dark. Some of it's reflective, where it's actually like the light will shine back at you. This is so laborsome to do.
Oh.
It's. I mean, I could do 25 things where the entire thing has a design in the same amount of time it would take me to do 2 or 3
I see.
articles of clothing like this.
Yeah.
And clearly, like I had a drive
I
to
see.
cover the whole thing in some way.
Yeah.
So this was just like, oh, hey, I figured out how to scale it. Because for years, people were like, you should figure out how to scale clothing. And I'm like, no, I'm just doing it because I want the clothes that I wear, I want them to be unique and just like mine.
Right.
And then I would gift them to people, like the ones that I'm like, that one slightly doesn't fit me, this or that. But then the bleach and then the highest quality ones, I'm just going to add a couple designs onto, such as, this is a bleached article of clothing.
Well.
But then it has a couple so they're all tests. And at the end of the day, with the patent office, I think someone could try reverse engineering, but bleach has existed and clothing has existed for a long time. There's the reason why someone hasn't made this. I don't know. It blows my mind. It took a lot of tooling around and playing with it. I had probably 30 shirts that had holes in it and rips because the bleach would eat away at it.
Yes.
So it took a long time to first off realize how to make it so the bleach
wouldn't do that.
affected. Yeah. So no, it is my driving passion in life. I am that entrepreneur in a way.
Oh yeah, I would say. Well, again, the reason why I brought that up is if you didn't want to get into the actual manufacturing of it, but you could find someone that would do that you take a percentage of everything that they sell, as opposed to, it just becomes a source of income for you. Well, that's a good size. Looks good on you.
I
Really.
appreciate it. This was one of the earlier ones. I guess that is my goal. And my hope was the goodwill in people. A lot of my most profitable business relationships started by doing free work for them or coming with value in the hand, teaching people so they could teach their team certain things. So my hope was that that's possible in the retail world, but it might be too large a scale. It might need to be, but I don't know if it'd be like the time and energy it would take to patent it to make sure no one can do this when it. So, it's a very interesting nebulous kind of concept of what I should do.
Or the other idea is just to set up a consulting business and you are paid for your knowledge and you're hired by certain companies to provide them with that expertise. That might be another way to take advantage of your knowledge, because that's what it is. It's knowledge. People don't know about it, or they don't have the ability to create something that good, and you've got examples of it, and
that's part
they're
of the
always looking for something.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I'm not selling all of them, or the majority of them. Is I'm like, well, I don't want to. Yeah, I change it back, and then it's like the whole goal of it is to show that it's like one person can do this level of scale, and the amount of mess ups I have is so low. So it's like all these ways that would speak to a manufacturer and a scale facility. Like I'm trying to speak in terms of hey, financially makes sense, less labor, less cost, the actual material. It's a new thing in the marketplace that has. So I'm going to sell some to show that there's a proven market for them. But yeah, I'm excited to update you where I do go with it.
Yeah, and the other thought I had, I don't want to keep you from doing what you're trying to do, but I'm thinking of there was one other thought I had. You had Have you ever read Dr. Seuss?
Yeah, and just if you can move the mic, you can move, but if you just move the mic with you.
Oh, I'm on live?
Yeah, we haven't cut it. If you're, I mean, hey, I'm like,
I didn't know. Okay, well, I'm just saying to you,
Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss, do you read? Okay, there's a story in one of his books. It's a great story for you because of what you're trying to do with your shirts. It's about the star-bellied sneetches.
Okay.
And I wish I had a copy of it with me because I don't remember all the details. I just remember this. People are attracted to certain things, and the people who have the money and power can get what they want, it seems like. Mm-hmm. And so one day, sorry.
You're good.
I'm actually...
You can manhandle. You can grab it and go like this.
Okay.
I tell you at the end. Sorry.
So I'll just say, one day this guy comes to town. He has this machine with him, and in this town, there's two kinds of people: the ones that have it all, and the ones that don't have much. Mm-hmm. And you see that in life, so it just appears that way anyway. So he says to the people without, their heads are down, they're miserable in life, and he says to them, "What's wrong?" And they said, "Well, you see those other guys over there? You notice they have stars in their bellies, and they're going around with their heads up in the air, and they're telling everyone how great they are and so forth. Well, we want to be more like them." Mm-hmm. And so he says, "Well, I can help you with that." And they said, "Really? How?" "Well, you just give me $1, and then you come into my machine, and when you come out of the other end of the machine, you'll have a star in your belly just like those guys." So the first guy goes in, and he does that, and he comes out and he says, "Wow, I'm like these guys." And my head goes up, and all of a sudden the world looks hopeful, and I'm excited. And so one of his friends comes over and says, "What happened to you?" And he says, "Well, I'm not like you anymore. I'm like them." And he said, "I know, but how'd you do that?" He says, "You see that guy over there in the machine? You just give him $1, and then you go through the machine." And so he said, "Okay." So he goes in and gives him $1, and he comes out the other end. He has a star in his belly too. And pretty soon, the word gets out. And all these people that heads were down and pretty miserable start paying $1 each to go through the machine, and by the time they come out, there's a line, and ultimately everyone has a star in their belly. Oh, guess what happens?
It's no longer special.
Yes. So what happens to people that had the stars first? Mm-hmm. They said to the guy, "Hey, can you help us out?" And he says, "What are you trying to do?" He says, "We don't want to be like these people. We want to look different." And he said, "Okay, come on into my machine. Give me $1." And so he goes into the machine, comes out the other end, no star in the belly. And pretty soon, his buddy comes to him and says, "Hey, how did you do that?" And he told him he went through it, the same process. Pretty soon, they had a line going through. And by the end of the story, it was one complete line going through the machine, and everyone's either miserable or happy. And by the time it comes away, the only thing it shows is the guy leaving town with all this money coming out the top of his machine. And I said to myself right there, that is so typical to the economy that we know today. People are always looking to be a little different and recognize, and you're doing that for them, really. You may not see that, but it's unique, and people, if they feel like it allows them to get the attention they want, which is what they want to at least be recognized, if not more than that, I would just say, just read that story. I thought it was worth mentioning because I've never forgotten it. I read it 40 years ago and with reading it to my kids, and I'm thinking to myself, this is a lot more useful than all the other stuff I'm reading. So I'll just say to you, go back into your Dr. Seuss and see if you can read about the star-bellied sneetches.
Star-bellied sneetches.
And that will hopefully give you some ideas to how you can ultimately do it. Maybe not you yourself, but
Mhm.
you have contracts with someone that allows them to do it, and you make money off of it.
Yeah, I like that. I appreciate it. I will read it and I'll get back to you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
I always feel like we're so complicated if we just become simple, and that's what Dr. Seuss did. He just pointed out things that seem overwhelming, like the Lorax, with the environmental issues that came up. Well, he made it really plain so that even little kids could see that wasn't good.
Yeah. That's and meaningful, impactful in a way
Right.
where it stays with all of us. That's
Yeah,
really
exactly.
important.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, being the first guest back. And hey, you might be one of the only guests on the show.
Well, he never know. That could be at the beginning of an explosion.
Yeah. Or more or less we could move. So I'm glad I captured it.